Today we're going to be making one of my favorite items to crochet, the super cute baby tee. Okay, so to make this top, we're going to need some yarn, a guide t-shirt, which we're going to use to get the initial measurements, measuring tape, a crochet hook, scissors, a button, needle and thread, and then of course some stitch markers. So the yarn I'm using is the Karen Cotton Cake yarn, and it's a medium weight 4 yarn, 60% cotton and 40% acrylic. I like using this particular yarn for this project because it's softer than 100% acrylic yarn, but it's more durable than like 100% cotton yarn. Also, the colorways that it comes in are so cute. Like, look at these colors. I'm obsessed. And I feel like it's fairly accessible. I bought it from Michael's. So if you have a Michael's around you, you can check them out. I do want to note, though, that you can use any like yarn that you want. It is made to measure. Just keep in mind that since it's something you're going to wear, you want to choose a yarn that feels good on your skin. So if possible, I encourage you to buy your yarn in person so that you can feel the texture. Or of course, always, girl, use the yarn you already got at home. So before we start anything, we're going to make a gauge swatch. And I know y'all hate making the gauge swatch. Girl, I do too. But when you're making made to measure items, a gauge swatch is literally a must. So I know it's not the most fun thing in the world, but I promise you will never regret spending those extra couple of minutes making one. I make my swatches 3 rows of 20 stitches. I know it's really big. Yours doesn't necessarily have to be that big, but your beginning stitches and your end stitches are usually tighter than the ones in the middle. So I make mine big just to like make sure I can get an accurate measurement. Again, I know that this is low-key like a pain in the ass, but it's so necessary, and I promise it saves so much time in the end. So now that my tee is laid out as flat as possible and the seams are lining up, we're gonna measure from collar to find the neck measurement. So I included a diagram on the screen just to make it a little bit easier. What I'm going to do is measure from collar to collar, which is the pink line, and then subtract 1 to get the orange line, which is the neck measurement. So when I measured my pink line, I got 7. Subtract 1 is 6. So for my neck measurement, I'm going to use 6. Okay, so once we find that number, we need to find out how many stitches are in 1 inch. So I'm holding up my measuring tape to, what? Yeah, my gauge swatch. I told you we were going to need it. And for me, 3 stitches equals 1 inch. So your numbers might be completely different from mine. That is totally fine. It's going to depend on the type of yarn that you're using, your tension, as well as your hook size. I'm just showing you how we find the numbers. Okay, so now that we have the front number, remember mine is 6 inches or 18 stitches, we can start the calculations. Now, I know math is the absolute worst part about crocheting, like even worse than the gauge swatch, but I pinky promise this isn't too bad. So before we start, I want you to know that the first number we got, mine is 18, has to be an even number, and then half of that number also has to be an even number. So since I got 18, 18 is an even number, we're good on that. But half of 18 is 9, and 9 is not an even number. So I can either round up or round down. Since this is a baby tee and I want it to be pretty fitted on my neck, I'm going to round down to 16. 16 is an even number, and then half of 16, 8 is also an even number. Also, remember that yarn stretches, so if you're ever in doubt, I personally recommend you round down as opposed to rounding up, but remember, you'll know your body better than anybody else. Okay, so now that I've determined that 16 is the final number of stitches I'm going to have in the front neck part, we need to determine how many stitches are going to be on the other sides. So I think the easiest way to explain it and understand it is think of the neck opening of the shirt as a rectangle. So the little gap right here in my drawing is going to be the seam. So the 2 long sides will be the same number and the 2 short sides will be the same number. Since 16 is our starting number, that's going to be the number of stitches in the front and the back, or the 2 long sides. Remembering that the seam is going to be in the back of our piece, we can't crochet 16 across in the back the same way we can in the front. So instead, we're going to split it up in half. So the right side of the seam is going to be 8, the left side of the seam is going to be 8, but in total it'll be 16, the same way that it is in the front. To find the short sides, we're going to take half of our long number plus half of that number. So since my long side number is 16, half of that is 8, and then half of that is 4. So 8 plus 4 is 12. My short sides would be 12. Let's say your long number was 24. Your short side would be 18 because half of 24 is 12, and then half of 12 is 6. 12 plus 6 is 18. So you're going to take the same concept and apply it to whatever numbers you have. Once you find the number of stitches for your long sides and your short sides, you'll want to account for where we're going to place our increases. So we're going to increase 4 times every round, 1 in each corner. So regardless of what numbers you get, you will always add 4 to those numbers because every round we're going to increase 4 times. So my foundation chain is going to be my 2 long sides plus my 2 short sides plus 4. So for me, that's going to be 16 plus 16 plus 12 plus 12 plus 4, which equals 60. So to start my T, I'm going to chain 60. Okay, so now that we have our foundation chain, we're ready to start the round. So you're going to chain 2 more. That's going to act as your turning chain. And I want to mention that I never count the turning chain as a stitch. So you're going to place 1 double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook, and then double crochet 7 more, which will make 8 total. So we're going to follow the diagram. So after that 8, we're going to place an increase. So an increase will be 2 double crochet into 1 stitch. So after my 8 stitches, I'm going to increase, which is 2 double crochet in 1 stitch, and then I'm going to place 12 double crochets, and then after that 12 double crochet, I'm going to increase, and then I'll place 16 double crochets, and then I'll increase, and then another 12 double crochets, and then I'll increase, and then the last 8 double crochets, and then you should reach the seam. So after round 1, you can see that our work is starting to look like our rectangle diagram. So I'm not going to join the rounds together just yet. Since this is a fitted tee and it's pretty tight on the neck, the hole is not big enough for my head, and I definitely don't want to force it through and then over time stretch out the yarn. So what I'm going to do instead is crochet up until round 5, and then I'll join it together then, and then secure round 1 through 4 with the button. Now we're starting round 2. So since we're increasing 4 times every round, the number of stitches you place on each side will go up each round as well. So I like to write the number of stitches each round will have before I start, just because it makes it easier for me to follow. But remember that every side will go up 2 stitches each round. And since the back is split in half, they will go up 1 for each half, making it 2 in total. So I'll include the number of stitches each round my tee has on the screen. But remember that since this is made to measure, your number might be different, but you can see my numbers and the pattern and then apply it to your work. So after the 9th stitch of the 2nd row, we're going to place our increase, and I want to make a note about the last stitch before the increase. So the last stitch before the increase, regardless of where it is on the top, is going to look like it's almost in the middle of the increase of the previous row. So I included this picture just to make it a little bit easier to see, but if your last stitch before your increase doesn't fall on this place every single time, I would go back and try to find the mistake, because it should end up in the middle of the increase of the previous row every single time. The end of row 5 is when I'm going to start joining my work. So you want to make sure that before you join your work in the round, the opening is large enough to fit your head through without having to stretch it. So you can join before or after round 5, depending on how large you need the opening to be. But I found that row 5 is the sweet spot. So in this clip right here, this is me at the end of row 5. And now I'm going to slip stitch to join my work in the round like so, chain 2 and turn. And so even though from here on out we will be crocheting in the round, you'll still want to turn your work. Okay, so this is what my piece is looking like at the end of the 10th row. Super, super cute, right? Super cute. And here I am trying it on. So my shirt is just a little bit too short. When you try it on, you're gonna want the front and the back, like when they're level on you, if that makes sense. You want them to reach your armpits. So mine is still just a little bit too short. I'm gonna crochet 2 more rows and then we'll come back.
I'm moving up the street, ain't feeling my heartbeat no more, but I found my melody. I'll take one more, please, yeah. So I grab my teeth, they want to keep receipts. I said, I buried the old me, 6 feet under, in case you wonder.
And this is me trying it on 2 rows later. You can see where it sits on my body. You want yours to be around the same length. And now it's time to make the armholes. So the armholes are made by connecting the front and back piece corners with chain. So first we need to find out how many chains we need to crochet. So you can see how I'm using my measuring tape to measure underneath my arm and get the measurement. Once you find the number of inches, you'll refer back to your gauge swatch. So I measured 7 inches, so my total number of chains would be 21. Remember that for my specific swatch, there are 3 stitches in an inch. 3 times 7 is 21. I personally like to work with even numbers, so I'm going to round down to 20, but now I know I'll need to connect the front and back panels with 20 chains. So our next row, for me it's 13, is where we create the armholes. So we're going to chain 2 and start the row as usual. The back halves always increase by 1, so since my half last round was 19, this time it will be 20. So I'm going to double crochet 20 into the next 20 stitches, and that will take us to the first corner. So this is the place where we normally increase. This time, instead of increasing, I'm going to slip stitch into that stitch and then chain 20. Your chains might be different. It is based on the number you got after measuring your under armpits, but after I've chained 20, I'm going to slip stitch into the place where I would normally increase on the opposite side of the garment. So this part is just a little bit difficult to explain, but essentially you're going to want to join the 2 corners together, and then your chain is going to be in between it. So at the end, it should kind of look like this. This now brings us to the front of the garment. So after the slip stitch, I'm going to double crochet 40 into the next 40 stitches. Remember that the front will increase by 2 more than what you had in the last row. So after the 40th stitch, I will be in the corner where we would traditionally increase. Instead of increasing, I'm going to slip stitch into that space, chain 20, and then slip stitch to connect the front panel to the back. So basically, we're just going to mirror what we did on the other side. Okay, so once you've tried on your tee and you've made sure that you like the fit and that it's not cutting off your circulation, we're ready to crochet the body. So this part is super simple since we're done increasing. So to calculate the number of stitches we will work in the round, we're going to add up our front and our chain stitches. So for me, that's 40 plus 40, my 2 long sides or the front sides, plus 20 plus 20, which are the chains I made for the armpits. So in total, I will work 120 double crochet in the round. So to start the round, we're going to chain 2 like normal, and then I'm going to insert 20 double crochets into the next 20 stitches. This is going to take me to my chain that I just made to make the armhole. I'm going to insert 20 double crochets into those 20 chains, and then along the front of the shirt, this is where I'm going to input 40 double crochets along the front, and then that's going to take me to the corner where the chain is. Insert 20 into that chain and then 20 into the back row. That's where I get my 120. So at this point, this is what your tee should be looking like. And now I'm just going to double crochet 120 stitches in the round until I reach the desired length. So I made 13 more rows, and in total my shirt had 27 rows, but you can make it as short or as long as you'd like to fit your body. So the last thing we're going to do is secure row 1 through 4 with the button. So this is my all-time favorite way to secure a fitted top. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I think it's easier to just make a button instead of trying to force your head through a really small hole. This is pretty simple. You're just going to sew a button onto one side of your tee, and then since crochet naturally creates holes, you don't have to worry about making a hole for your button. So I think this is one of those things that's just a little bit easier to show than it is to explain. And finally we are done, and we're left with the cutest crochet baby tee ever. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was a little bit helpful to at least one person. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.